So yeah, if you're like a normal man and you're not in a kind of like upper echelon of men, you're not like insanely good looking, or I guess some people, they just exude like a very good like natural charisma, or they have a vibe, like a certain vibe that either specific people like or that all people like, or where you can kind of tell what type of person they are from looking at them. Like they have a certain style or a way of being or a way of presenting themselves where it kind of, yeah, again, like either it kind of works like generally across the board of everybody, or they tap into a very specific kind of thing that people tend to like. Whatever the case, unless you fit into one of those categories, you most likely know what I'm talking about in terms of you most likely probably found it like quite difficult if you tried online dating. And there are people who are kind of, I guess, exceptions to this, who kind of impose that on other people, I guess, and are like, oh, you just need to do this or you just need to do that, and like, yeah, I'm fine on there, and I just blah blah blah, and like, I think some of those people are lying, to be honest, or exaggerating. I think some of them, they just, again, it's just like a certain like je ne sais quoi, they just like have a certain vibe that works with people, or they seem at the very least they seem like completely approachable, and they come off very well in like first impressions and in profiles and things like that. I think that's very rare. Like, I think most of the time, if someone comes off well in like a context like, for example, Tinder, they're usually just very good looking. Like, there's not really, people don't really, basically it's pretty much about photos. Like, so I think those people are definitely the exception and not the rule, and I don't really recommend, well, I mean, by all means, they might have like useful information or advice, but I wouldn't recommend using them as a point of comparison, because that will just make you depressed. So yeah, the reason for all of this, I think, is obvious, is basically that men vastly outnumber women on these apps, like massively, and the companies won't admit this. They will do anything they can to alter the figures and to try and make it appear like it's a kind of level playing ground, but it's not. A lot of reasons for that, I guess. Some of them, men are just like more, in a weird way, kind of more keen to meet women than the other way around. Also, obviously, like typically men are more comfortable with being with like multiple women and having lots of like short-lived, relationships, if they can even be qualified as such. And so so they're kind of more like omnipresent in the dating world, and they're just basically always there, whereas women are more of like a kind of like ephemeral presence that are like, I guess also it's just maybe like if women go out, like they don't have to necessarily do that much to meet men, so they don't really have necessarily the need to go on apps, whereas there might be men who like find it difficult. Women can go out on the street and get approached, like depends what country you're in, but like here, for example, if you're a woman, it's pretty easy to meet men. Like even if you're just like moderately attractive, you can just like go to the park and like attractive men will just like talk to you. So they have less need to use apps and stuff. So yeah, seemingly men massively outnumber women on there. So that's one thing already to bear in mind. Like, imagine if you're a man, right? Imagine if you lived in a country where there were 5 women for every man. You wouldn't be dating women that look like you, or that are at your social level, at your level of attractiveness, at your level of kind of like social value. You would be dating like amazing women because there would be so few like you wouldn't. There would be women who were like you, who were at your level of attractiveness, who look like you, and you wouldn't even like really, you wouldn't even think about dating them, right? If you were in this country, that is what it's like for women, basically, like on these apps. It's crazy. So like, that's the first and most important thing to remember, because I think if you don't have an awareness of that, it's brutal. Like, it's really, really brutal. For your self-esteem. and just for your level of kind of like satisfaction and enjoyment of life. The thing is, in the world, right, there's like more or less an even number of men and women, and for everyone who's like, oh, I'm like a fucking freak, or I'm so ugly, or I'm so like shit, like I'll never find like, well, if you think about it logically, there is probably an opposite sex equivalent of you, like not literally one, but what I'm saying is, for every guy who's a 10, there's women who are 10s. For every guy who's a fucking 2, there's women who are 2s. I'm not saying everyone has to like, evenly fucking, but essentially, like, there are more or less an even number of men and women. Most people in the long term, they do want to like settle down. So theoretically, there's, roughly speaking, more or less someone out there for everyone. But obviously some people have social barriers, self-esteem barriers, circumstantial barriers that make it impossible for them to get past the initial kind of period of socialization with that person, or socializing with that person, to kind of connect in a meaningful way. So I do understand that that's not a sensible way to it's not a sensible thing to try and apply across the board. But if you're like, say you just like, you think, even if you think like you're like below average looking, right, and you're like not very charismatic, you're not very successful, okay, there are women who are like that as well. That's essentially my point. So if you have had these experiences of rejection or of failure in these contexts, dating in these contexts, that doesn't, fine, you might not be like ever like really popular with women, right? But it doesn't actually, what it says about you is not accurate. It's not giving you an accurate message about yourself. It's giving you the message essentially that you are just going to be alone, and that like no one will ever want to go out with you, and that you're fucking like terrible. And that is not accurate. It's a product of the situation that you find yourself in. Again, it doesn't mean you're fucking amazing. Like, it doesn't mean you're maybe as good as you once thought you were. It doesn't mean that life is going to be easy for you. I'm just saying that the way that depicts you as a person is really not accurate or fair in a sense. I think using the word fairness is incorrect here, because it's kind of irrelevant if it's fair or not. But life isn't fair. There's no such thing. Yeah. So the downside of this for women as well is quite substantial, in my opinion, because I'm going to talk about people in numerical terms here, which is like a bit fucking, I don't know, it's just not a nice way to talk about people really, but it's just for practical terms, it's useful for the purpose of this conversation. So say you're a woman who's like a 6, you can easily sleep with men who are 10s. Now, most of the time, they're not going to say to you, yeah, I'm just fucking you. Like, I'm never going to go out with you. I'm just fucking you. They're going to lie, right? They do. It happens all the time. So they will lie to women who are like, oh my God, this guy's like incredible. He's like so handsome. He's like a pilot or a lawyer or something. And he's so hot and he likes me and stuff. And they get shagged for like 2 weeks by a guy who often already has a fucking wife or a girlfriend, or is sleeping with like 5 other women at the time, or doesn't have any respect for them whatsoever. And how that's not the woman's fault. Like, imagine you're a guy, imagine women who were like insanely hot were using you in that way, and you might think like, oh fuck it, I don't care. Like, no, you would, because you wouldn't just be attracted to them, you would start to be like, oh my God, like I want to be with this woman, like she's so hot and amazing and interesting, I love her, I want to fucking marry her, blah blah blah. After 2 weeks she's just gone, and she's fucking deleted your number or blocked you or something. You're like, what the fuck happened? I thought we were, gonna go out. And imagine that happened to you all the time. And I'm not saying this happens over and over again. I think as well, like, women sometimes get burned by these experiences and are like, fuck it. But that happens to people, right? It is a product of this thing. It then gives a lot of these women a warped sense of their attractiveness or value. They maybe don't have to try very hard to be interesting. They also feel that maybe they're entitled to more than they really are. So then when there's a guy who's like, you know, more similar to them, who's like a 6 or a 7, who actually wants to go out with them and actually takes them seriously as a dating prospect, they just look at that guy and they're like, it's a bit disappointing after, you know, what I'm used to. This guy seems fucking boring, and I'm supposed to be with guys like this guy who disappeared. And, you know, it's like, it's very understandable to me. And I think that's important to remember, because it's easy as a man to fall into a trap of like blaming women for this situation. And by all means, I don't think people should remove like individual accountability for their behavior from the equation, but that is individual accountability. It's not gendered accountability, because there are a lot of things men do that, like some men do, that greatly negatively impact on this situation overall. I think it is a product of a flawed system rather than one gender or the other being inherently bad. Again, though, that doesn't, you know, when it comes down to an individual level, like, some people take the realities, the nature of this system, and it becomes a reason or an excuse, or a kind of motivation to behave very badly. And like, that is just not acceptable, but it just comes down to an individual level, quite honestly. It's easy to look at the overall kind of blanket like dismissiveness of women, and then to couple that with individual experiences of women being like very unpleasant or disrespectful, and to lump those two things together and to get a very negative perception of them as a whole. But it's very important, I think, very, very important to watch yourself and to not do that. And it's important to remind yourself of some of the stuff that goes the other way. And that, to be fair, a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm just trying to, like, you know, like, women have talked to me like this and they won't do this, and they, like, you know, and like, sometimes I do think, well, what are your intentions? Like, it does kind of sound like you just want to have sex, and you're sort of upset that your attempts at deceiving or manipulating women into having sex are not successful. And that is not everybody, but there are some guys who they complain about this stuff in the same manner as people who are like sincerely looking to date or sincerely looking to have a relationship, or at the very least who are like upfront about what they want. They complain about it in the same manner, and I'm not really sure they're in a totally valid position to do so, because in a sense I think those people are part of the problem as well. I think there are a lot of men who are a part of the problem because they're kind of comfortable to just like use people for sex, basically, which women do as well. Yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm trying to avoid making sweeping statements about either group, because I don't think they're correct, and I think it's just it's not helpful. There's a lot of content online. There's a lot of like after I went through, I broke up with my ex, and I started getting into like trying to date and stuff, and I got very depressed very quickly, and I ended up, you find all this shit online, like this like red pill stuff, and like what I would say about that is some of what they say is by and large true. It is essentially true, and I understand where a lot of these people are coming from and why they think the way that they do. However, I think that it is not a complete truth, and B, it's a very poisonous one that can wreck your mind. Maybe for some people it's empowering and it doesn't have a bad effect on the way that they treat other people or on their own chances of success in life, but by and large I don't think that's the case. So I think it is kind of an incomplete and mildly poisonous truth that it's very damning. It's very, very damning, and I think it misses out some key details of this problem, and it's a very initially cathartic outlet for emotion, for understandable anger. And I think that's what people need to remember, is that like these feelings of anger, they are fucking understandable. Like in the same way you look at things like Me Too and stuff, and like I didn't see this so much in England, to be honest, but I've seen in recent years, I've seen here, like, sometimes men are so disgusting, like the way they, like, just like sexually harassing women. Recently I've seen a lot of like disgusting sexual harassment, and like ones with my exes, like people like fucking filming, like trying to like take pictures up her skirt and shit, like men just saying the most disgusting shit, like seriously vile stuff, like actually vile. And I know, again, like I know women do it too as well sometimes, but so when you look at that, right, like it's understandable that women look at that as like it is understandable to some degree that women look at that as like a blanket thing, and it makes them angry, like, and it makes them on some level kind of hate men. I think what you have to look at the other side as well and understand like why some people begin to hate women, like or at the very least become very angry. I don't think it's the correct way to approach things, but I think it's routinely dismissed and lumped in with like mass murder and kind of like conspiracy stuff and like weird it's like this taboo thing, and it's like if you even remotely even think about the world in that way, you're like Elliot Rodger or something, and it's I don't think that's fair, and I don't think it's right, and I think it is, above all, it's silly because it completely dismisses the possibility that there is any initial valid basis for these feelings or for these subcultures or groups to pop up, and it misses the point of the problem basically. But anyway, yeah, I'm keen to avoid like the sort of weirdly politicized component of this because I just can't really be bothered to get into it and whatever. Like, take what I say in that regard with a pinch of salt. But yeah, the apps are fucked. What you will probably find, the experience you will most likely have, in my estimation, again, unless you're kind of an outlier, is you might be able to like chat with some women. They might display a mild interest in you, which frequently, if we're being honest, is like a mode of garnering attention. Maybe they want to keep a few coals in the fire just to see, like, oh, maybe he'll suddenly appear really interesting. But usually I think it is for attention, really. It's like free attention. When they're feeling bored or insecure or lonely, they will like talk to people who they don't really have any intention of dating. It's usually, for most guys, it's very, very hard to actually go on dates, and if you do, they will probably be with people who realistically you don't really actually want to go out with. Yeah, there's another big problem that one part of it that I think is a real shame is there's again, because as I mentioned, we've had like the Me Too movement and stuff, right? And we've and it's just a heightened awareness of things like that in general. There's a general kind of awareness now of like things that typically men do that are not nice. We don't really have that kind of collective societal awareness when it comes to women. So I do feel sometimes there is a lack of, in the same way that a lot of men after like Me Too movement were like, oh yeah, shit, like women don't like it. Women don't like it when you make, jokes like that in the workplace. And like, women don't like it. And I think obviously some of that went like too far, but some of it is totally valid. Like, and a lot of people realize like, oh shit, yeah, this makes people uncomfortable and this isn't nice and this hurts people's feelings and it makes them feel devalued and it makes them feel dehumanized and objectified. And we haven't yet developed that same awareness the other way around. We haven't yet developed an awareness of like things that maybe women are more likely to do that are very unpleasant. In this context, there are quite a few. And I think because of that, because we don't have that awareness, there's less of an emphasis or standard placed on like decorum, I think, and like just basic decency that transcends kind of gender experiences or whether or not you really know someone in real life. There's just certain standards of decency that I think should be adhered to. And a thing I see with guys a lot and hear from them a lot is women, probably 90% of the time, if you arrange a date with them, they don't go on that date with you. Like they 2 days before, someone more attractive, more interesting will message them and invite them to do something more fun, more exciting, and suddenly, their dog is ill, or the electricity's gone out in their house, or they have to go to work, and this isn't followed by, oh, do you want to do it this day instead? It's just flaking out and basically saying, I don't want to go out with you, which is frustrating because well, they had enough interest to agree to go out with you in the first place, so you're obviously not like a fucking turd of a human, but it's nigh on impossible to actually like meet them a lot of the time these days. So that is an extremely frequent experience, and if you are having that experience, it's important to remember that it's pretty normal. And again, you imagine it the other way round. You imagine you had this level of attention from women. I don't know. I would like to think that I would have enough respect for people's time not to do that, and that I probably just wouldn't arrange to, I would quickly learn, like, okay, someone like this is probably not going to be that interesting to me, and I will wait and see what else is going on next Thursday, and if I agree to do something, I'm just going to do it, basically. Like, you make plans with someone, unless you really can't, then you should just go through those plans. Maybe they feel they're wasting your time even more if they go out with you because they know, like, actually, there's much more fucking interesting guys around the corner. If I go out with this guy, I'm just wasting his time and money. Fair enough, but it seems something that is typically not handled very well, and it is really, when that happens to you frequently, it's really, really annoying. Like, it really is annoying and out of order, and it took me a long time to realise that is pretty much just something I should just assume. Like, if I arrange to go out with a woman, I just assume it's not going to happen. I just assume, like, I assume that there is a tiny chance that the date will actually happen, so I don't really take it seriously at all, because it's the same. It's the same with everyone I know. Like, they're like, oh yeah, I've arranged to see this girl next week, and we're both like, okay, so probably she's going to cancel. It'd be a miracle if it actually goes ahead, and that is normal. Yeah. In my experience, I mean, when I first got on there, I was very naive about it because I'd been in a relationship for like almost a decade, and I just thought like, oh, I'll just hop on and whatever, and not really worry about it too much. And it was like awful. Like, I had like the worst time of it ever. It was fucking terrible. Just rejection, ignored, whatever. It was so bad, and I thought like, Jesus, I must be the worst. Like, this is terrible. It made me feel so bad. And then recently I got back on again, and I made much more of a kind of effort. I thought about it more. It was more kind of strategic. Made sure I had like better pictures and stuff. And it was better. It was like much better. Like, I was talking to some women who were like, like, who I was quite attracted to, and I thought seemed nice and stuff. Some like quite decent quality women. But that was it, basically. And it got to a point after a month or so of this, I was like, I'm not fucking wasting my time. It's like, it's just so boring and tedious and annoying, basically. And it's annoying when like, you're quite a decent person, you're quite like, you have good qualities to offer, and you don't really get the opportunity. Like it is really annoying. It, in my experience, was not like this in the past. I don't know how it's changed so much, but I remember in the early days of like Plenty of Fish and OkCupid and stuff, like it was much easier. Like, I was like 19 at this point, and I was like, I don't know, like I guess I was like fucking younger, and I like had hair and shit, but I was a mess. I was really weird. I was like a mess. I was not confident like I am now. Like I was not. I just was, I was really odd, and I was still able to talk to quite a lot of women, and like I went out with some quite hot women, and like I wasn't like good looking back then, and I was again I had really odd photos, and my profile was fucking strange, and like I didn't have much sense of like, but it just seemed easier then. It just was much easier, and a lot of people I know have like I have a friend who's like. He's very similar now to how he was like 5 years ago. The only difference is he kind of has like more money, he's more mature, he's like more confident. He looks exactly the same, literally. And it's impossible for him now. But in the past, it was pretty easy, like 5 years ago. And I've noticed this with a lot of people. It's just, it's getting worse and worse, basically. So yeah, man, fucking don't beat yourself up if that's the experience you're having. I know it's impossible because most of us need validation, external validation, and it's very painful in a way when you don't get it. And the more that goes on, the worse it can make it. I know that I became like, I started to lose my sense of self a bit, and was like chasing validation from women in ways that made me not like myself, and in ways that made me lose touch with who I am and to behave like somebody else. And that was the worst part of it, was for me, was I realised like, oh, I don't like being this way. I'm doing this because I'm so desperate to get like the approval of women, because I've felt so burned by these like demeaning experiences I've had. Because there have been some very demeaning experiences that have really made me feel pretty bad. Yeah, it that's the worst part, I think. So like it's very important, I think, to maintain a very strong sense of self. Like I know it's a cliche, but I think overall, in the long term and in reality, and like the cold light of day, like someone who is like themselves and who respects themselves and who has a sense of independence and confidence and isn't seeking the approval of others so intently, is much more attractive than someone who's like, you know, kind of insecure and trying to pander, or like not being themselves. I'm not saying that being yourself will fix all of your problems, but it's just important anyway, and it's important to focus on life outside of all this stuff. And it's just, yeah, it's just sad to lose yourself over something like that. Yeah, and as for like practical solutions, I mean, for me it's pretty difficult, to be honest. I live in a foreign country, and like I don't speak the language all that well, and for me, like my it's usually in speaking that I make a good impression, right? Like I can be like interesting or funny. I can't really do that here. Like it's pretty difficult. And I don't, I work from home. I don't work with other people. I'm socially uncomfortable, so I don't really like to go out. I don't drink. So it's like, it's pretty fucking difficult, to be honest. Like for me, like even if I, for example, go to events and things, like I'm not someone who makes a good first impression. And I think if you're one of those people like me who doesn't make a good first impression, but you are like a cool person or whatever, I think you need to be in some kind of like long-term capacity around other people, like a job, ideally, where you're around a lot of other people and they see you every day and they know like you're a cool person, you're not a weirdo, you're honest or whatever. They start to get to know what you're like over time, and they see you at your best. They see you when you're more comfortable or more relaxed, assuming you can be in that context. Anything like that you do regularly, if you're a person who doesn't make a good first impression, is really good. I should make more of an effort to do those things than I do. At the moment I just fucking can't be bothered, and I don't really care, to be honest. At the moment I've kind of like lost interest. I think, like, I don't know, to some extent I was in like a relationship for a long time, and like I'm not, part of me is thinking like, I think my like eagerness to date was also again just for like validation, because I felt so bad about myself. So I'm probably not focusing on it as much as I should, but it's very time consuming to do so, and I'm trying to just actually focus on my goals and stuff now, because they're more important to me, and I know it's better to focus on those things for the most part. I think if I was in England it would be a bit different and a bit easier, because I could say something and immediately know that that person will understand what I'm saying, whereas here I don't have that cultural reference points of people, and obviously linguistic, like it's just, yeah, so it's difficult. And if I'm speaking in a second language not very fluently, it just doesn't suit me, basically. I'm not the kind of guy who will come off well speaking in fucking broken Spanish most of the time. But yeah, I think I think it's worth considering maybe restructuring your professional life or the way you engage with your hobbies or interests. And I would not expect these things to have immediate results. I would not go into them with a sense of like expectation, because that can quickly manifest itself as a sense of entitlement, and that can become a source of bitterness or negativity towards others, which is not good in any way. I would assume, if it already has been, that it probably will still continue to be like kind of an uphill struggle, but that probably continuing to try and make something happen online on these apps is going to be most likely a waste of your time, and not only that, but it will make you feel bad. So I think, personally, it's better to try and find other ways if you can. Yeah, so I hope this was useful or interesting. Yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any experiences to share or thoughts on the video, as usual. And thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate all you guys who watch my videos. And yeah, I hope you're having a good day. Take care.